we are talking Gundala. This is a superhero movie from Indonesia and is actually the first movie in a planned shared universe of Indonesian superheroes. And this one is directed and co-written by Joko Anwar. So it is essentially a origin story, and it focuses initially on this young boy whose father is a civil rights activist and is killed in seemingly organised violence. His mother goes missing at a young age and he is forced to fend for his own. He meets kind of another young orphan who teaches him how to fight. And all this time he seems to have this attraction to lightning, so to speak, or more aptly, the lightning is attracted to him. He's initially afraid of it. However, he seems to have some supernatural ability where he's able to be hit by lightning and tap into its power and almost kind of store the power, a bit like a battery really, and able to use this to, have electrical attacks ultimately. And then we kind of cut to his adult life and he's working as a security guard. And let me tell you, this movie does nothing for the Indonesian tourist industry, as it just appears that there's literally violence around every corner. And the kind of the bulk of the story then focuses on now this kind of burgeoning hero as he is trying to face off against this evil mob boss who is trying to gain control of the country by essentially having an army of orphans that kind of worship him as a kind of a deity, so to speak. Okay, so let's first of all talk about what works, first of all, in this movie. Obviously, from Indonesia, so it is going to be a foreign language movie. You can obviously watch it dubbed or subbed, it's entirely up to yourself. Certainly has a lot of scale, and obviously this one being the first in a planned shared universe, my fears were it was going to spend a lot of time just trying to set things up, but it really doesn't do that. It is kind of somewhat of a self-contained story, really only kind of having one kind of thread towards the end, which is really more kind of looking at some kind of larger audience here. So that was I think the good move here. There's a lot of scale involved in this movie. There's a hell of a lot of extras. We see large kind of like gang fights and things like that. Obviously lots of kind of martial arts involved here. And the action is pretty non-stop, I have to say. Throughout the movie there are a variety of kind of different kind of martial arts scenes and fight scenes. Right from when he's a child right up until kind of the finale, to be honest with you. It is peppered with lots of delicious kind of fight scenes. I actually thought the backstory was pretty interesting. So I do have some issues with the narrative, which we'll talk about in a second. But the actual idea behind this kind of like this guy and how he's kind of got to where he is, I actually thought was quite good. And it's also well juxtaposed, kind of the villain of the piece, this kind of this mob boss, so to speak, who is using orphans to kind of do his bidding and kind of almost brainwashing them into becoming kind of his army, so to speak. And I actually thought those two kind of opposing storylines actually worked quite well in its favour here. I thought that was quite good. The movie is also kind of peppered with some quite fun little moments of humour here and there. It's not played like a jokey film, but there are a couple of kind of jokes that I thought were quite good. The movie is also surprisingly dark, which I suppose is a good and bad thing, which we'll come on to again in a second. But nonetheless, this movie does not shy away from violence. And there is a high body count with lots of kind of people getting killed on screen, and the violence does come across as being quite brutal at times. So what doesn't work? Sticking with that same point, I feel this movie has an odd tone because it does have some fairly explicit violence. I mean, it's not overly gory, but there's just a lot of killing in this movie and a lot of quite violent acts. It does, you almost take the superhero sort of side out of it. It will play like a kind of a martial arts action film. So it has this kind of like quite adult kind of theme in regards to some of the violence. But some of the kind of the character choices and overall goofiness seems a little bit more juvenile. So it has a little bit of a kind of a mixed tone to it, if you ask my opinion. I have to say as well, I think the story is somewhat convoluted. I did appreciate parts of this, certainly in regards to our character development and how certainly our opposing kind of like main characters do get to where they are. But nonetheless, the movie takes a very windy and convoluted path to get there, with seemingly a variety of other kind of sub-characters introduced and then kind of written out that seem to be just muddy the waters and really make it a lot more contrived than it kind of needed to be honest. So I did think this story was a little bit of a mess. The other thing I have to say, although there is lots of action within this movie, I think some of the fight scenes weren't particularly well choreographed and actually looked more like dancing than fighting. This is particularly true of, I think, the scenes where he's in his kind of superhero costume. I think some of the more brawling scenes look a little better, but when he's actually in his kind of superhero costume, there are some fight scenes that just look like they're danced, you know, they're choreographed. And then again, you also have some logic involved here. Again, this is what I mean with maybe the silliness, because you have just bad guys who are waiting in turn to kind of like fight this guy and things like this. There's also this scene where the bad guys get the upper hand on this kind of superhero by having some people close to him held hostage, and he's really at odds of what to do, but they just kind of let the hostages go and charge at him one at a time, and you know, it obviously sort of takes them out. So again, this is kind of what I'm referring to. It just has some very kind of juvenile moments compared with some quite adult content. So the story really seems fairly juvenile and more kiddie-like, but then you have this sort of weird mix of hyper-violence in there as well. So it's not, it's really not sophisticated enough for adult audiences, unless you really sort of watch some kind of violent fight scenes. So overall, I have to say this movie was a little bit of a mixed bag for me. I actually think it was, to be honest with you, was a little bit of a mess. It is an entertaining hot mess, perhaps, but nonetheless, it's a mess nonetheless. So I'm going to give this one a 5 out of 10. I think it's just about an average film for me. I don't think it really sets the bar particularly high for this kind of shared universe, but maybe later instalments maybe will improve upon the kind of the storytelling aspects of it. 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I shall look forward to you next time. Bye for now.